was 25, and the company he'd helped build was eating itself alive. The founder he had modeled his whole young career on, brilliant, magnetic, impossible, was watching an empire he loved implode from the inside, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. So Ryan Holiday rolled up his sleeve. Inked across his right forearm, in plain black letters, were 3 words he had carved into his own skin as a warning. Ego is the enemy. Not other people, not the market, not bad luck. The enemy already lives inside you, and it wears your face. He would spend years hunting that enemy through history. In a fighter pilot who was never promoted, a billionaire who flew a plane exactly once, a widow handed a newspaper the week her world collapsed. Watch how it hides, because it is hunting you, too. So what is this enemy exactly? Holiday's definition is deceptively small. Ego is an unhealthy belief in your own importance. The need to be better than, more than, recognized for, far past any real use. It feels like confidence. It behaves like poison. Because the physicist Richard Feynman left one warning above all others. The first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool. Ego is how you fool yourself. And here's the shape of a life it quietly sabotages. You aspire to something. Sometimes you succeed. Sometimes you fail. 3 stages, 1 recurring saboteur. When you are reaching, ego whispers that talk is progress. When you arrive, it says you are untouchable. When you fall, it screams that it is everyone's fault but yours. Aspire, succeed, fail. At every single one, ego is the enemy. Start with aspiration, the hungry years when you have big plans and nothing yet to show for them. In 1934, a writer named Upton Sinclair ran for governor of California. He was so certain of victory that he did something strange. He wrote a book describing his triumph in the past tense and published it before a single vote was cast. I, governor of California, it announced, and how he had ended poverty. He had already lived the win in his head. Then the election came, and he lost by 250,000 votes. Holiday's verdict is simple and merciless. Talk depletes us. Talking and doing fight for the same energy. Announce the plan, and your brain hands you the feeling of the finish line for free, so the work never gets done. The people who make it keep the goal quiet and let the doing be loud. There was a fighter pilot named John Boyd who understood this in his bones. Boyd reshaped modern air combat, the design of the fighter jets, the theory of maneuver warfare that militaries still teach today, and they never promoted him past colonel. He didn't care. Boyd used to give young officers a choice, a fork in the road. One way, he'd say, you can be somebody. You take the promotions, the titles, the corner office, and to get them, you compromise, you go along, you become whoever the system rewards. Or the other way, you can do something, real work, work that matters, work with your fingerprints on it. But to do it, he warned, you may have to stay invisible, to be or to do. He'd let it hang there in the silence. Which way will you go? Ego always wants the title. Purpose only wants the work. In 1983, a young guitarist named Kirk Hammett got the phone call every musician dreams of, a place in a band called Metallica. They would go on to sell over 100 million albums. So what did Hammett do with the break of a lifetime? He went and found a teacher. He hired a virtuoso and took weekly lessons because he'd decided he still wasn't good enough. That instinct has a name in Holiday's book, Stay a Student. The fighter Frank Shamrock built a whole system around it. Keep someone better than you nearby, someone worse, and an equal. So you're always learning, always teaching, always tested. Epictetus put the trap in a single line. It is impossible to learn what you think you already know. Hammett kept learning, but the player he replaced in that band, a furious young man named Dave Mustaine, would carry his wound for decades. Remember him. We'll come back to him. We are taught to worship passion. Follow your passion. Be passionate. Burn hot. Holiday says, be careful. When someone called Eleanor Roosevelt passionate, she flinched. I hardly think the word applies to me, she said. She wasn't cold. She helped reshape a nation. She just distrusted the heat. Because passion, Holiday argues, is all about you. I'm so passionate about this. It is a feeling, pointed inward, loud and unfocused. Purpose is different. Purpose is to and for, aimed at a task, in service of something outside yourself. Passion jumps into the deep end and drowns. Purpose learns to swim first. History is full of passionate people who marched armies into the Russian winter and sailed confidently into disaster, certain that wanting it badly enough was the same as being ready. It never is. Turn the heat into direction. Then you have something. Here is a strategy for anyone starting at the bottom, doing grunt work for people who haven't earned your respect. A teenage Benjamin Franklin wanted to write for his brother's newspaper. His brother refused. So Franklin invented a fictional widow named Silence Dogood, slipped her letters under the print shop door at night, and let his brother publish them, never knowing they were his. Franklin got exactly what he wanted by making someone else look good. Holiday calls this the canvas strategy. In ancient Rome, the servant who cleared the path ahead of an important man was the antibulo, the one who goes before. Be that. Find canvases for other people to paint on. Do the work that makes your boss, your mentor, even your rival shine, and quietly absorb everything. Build everything. Become the one they can't do without. Ego demands credit now. The canvas strategy trades credit for a foundation. In 1945, a baseball executive named Branch Rickey went looking for a player to break the color line, and he said something that stunned the man across the desk. He was not looking for a player with the guts to fight back. He wanted one with the guts not to. That man was Jackie Robinson. Proud, fierce, more than able to answer any insult thrown at him. And for 3 long years, he agreed to swallow every one of them. Pitchers threw at his head. Crowds and even opposing players screamed things too vicious to repeat. And Robinson, who wanted nothing more than to fire back, held the line, because he understood the assignment was bigger than his pride. Holiday draws the lesson out plainly. When others treat you poorly, it doesn't lower you. It lowers them. That restraint was not weakness. It was the most powerful thing on the field. During the Civil War, the Union had a general with a magnificent problem. He could not stop listening to himself. George McClellan built a beautiful army and then couldn't bear to risk it. In his mind, the enemy was always bigger, always closer, always about to destroy him. He imagined whole phantom divisions that were never there. He wrote letters calling the president a fool, and he sat and would not move. The writer Anne Lamott has a name for the voice in McClellan's head, a radio station that never stops broadcasting your anxieties and your grandiosity, back to back, all day long. Ego turns the volume up. Now compare George Marshall, who in the Second World War refused to keep a diary because he feared that a nightly audience with himself would tempt him to justify, to pose, to play to his own legend. Get out of your own head. Nobody wins the war being fought in there. The most dangerous moment is not failure. It is the first taste of success, because that is when pride sneaks in, early and uninvited. When a young Benjamin Franklin visited the preacher Cotton Mather, Mather suddenly barked, "Stoop! Stoop!" Franklin had walked straight into a low beam. "Stoop as you go through this world," Mather told him, "and you'll miss many hard thumps." John D. Rockefeller built the greatest fortune of his age, and every single night he talked himself back down, warning himself out loud not to let success wreck him before he'd truly begun. Even Genghis Khan, of all people, knew it. If you cannot swallow your pride, he said, you cannot lead. Early pride tells you that you've arrived when you have barely started. It trades the humility that got you here for a swagger that will get you killed. Stoop. There is a long way still to go. So what actually builds a career, if not talk, not passion, not pride? The unglamorous answer is work. When a young poet complained to a painter that he had wonderful ideas but couldn't get the poems to come, the poet Malorme cut him off. Poems are not made with ideas, he said. They are made with words. Everyone has ideas. The work is what's rare. There is a painful gap early on between your taste, which is good, and your skill, which isn't there yet. Ego wants to skip that gap. It wants the credit for the vision. But the only way across is thousands of unseen hours, doing the work when nobody is clapping. Doing the work is enough. That is the whole of the aspiring years. And then, if you're lucky, If the work pays off, you get the thing you wanted. You succeed. And for everything that comes next, ego is the enemy all over again. Remember the billionaire who flew a plane exactly once? Meet Howard Hughes. At 18, he inherited a fortune. For the rest of his life, the world treated him as a bold, visionary maverick, and he may have been one of the worst businessmen of the 20th century. He poured around $20 million into a giant wooden aircraft the world mocked as the Spruce Goose. It flew a single time, about a mile, 70 feet above the water, then never again. His company's bled money he quietly covered with his father's fortune, and ego drove him slowly into paranoia, addiction, and the dark. Near the end, an aide gushed, "What an incredible life you have led." Hughes answered that if the man had ever traded places with him, he'd have begged to swap back before the first week was out. This is what success does when ego takes the controls. It doesn't build the man, it devours him. How do you survive success? Look at the most feared conqueror in history, and notice the part the movies leave out. Genghis Khan did not win by being the strongest. He won by being the most relentless student on earth. His Mongols couldn't take walled cities, so he absorbed foreign engineers and learned siege warfare. They meant new weapons, new faiths, new tools, and instead of dismissing them, the Mongols swallowed them whole, spreading gunpowder, paper, the humble lemon, and the counting system across a continent. The physicist John Wheeler said it best: "As our island of knowledge grows, so does the shoreline of our ignorance. The more you learn, the more you see how much is left." Ego wants to close that shoreline off. It says you've learned enough, you've arrived, you can coast now. The one who lasts refuses that comfort and stays forever a student. When Bill Walsh took over the San Francisco 49ers, they were the worst team in football. Reporters demanded to know, "When will you win a championship?" Walsh refused to answer. He would not set a date, would not sell a dream. Instead, he installed what he called a standard of performance, an almost boring obsession with how every little thing was done, right down to how the players wore their uniforms. "Take care of the details," he said, "and the score takes care of itself." 2 seasons later, they won it all. Holiday's warning here is about the stories we tell ourselves, the grand narrative of destiny and genius that ego loves to write. The founder Paul Graham offers the antidote in 4 words. Keep your identity small. The moment your success becomes a story about how special you are, you stop doing the quiet work that made it true. Drop the story. Keep the standard. Ulysses Grant won the Civil War. He should have been content. Instead, ego wanted more. He chased the presidency, served 2 rocky terms, and then, hungry to prove himself a titan of business as well, he handed his money and his name to a charming young financier. The man was running a swindle, a Bernie Madoff of his day. It collapsed. Grant, the most famous man in America, was suddenly broke and humiliated. Holiday asks the question Grant never stopped to ask: what is actually important to you? The Stoics had a word, euthymia, the calm of knowing your own path and not being pulled off it by everyone else's. Ego hates trade-offs. It wants the war and the White House and the fortune, all of it, because stopping might mean you are not the biggest, but a person who knows what matters can walk past 100 shiny things. Grant couldn't. It cost him nearly everything. Success breeds 3 quiet diseases, Holiday warns: entitlement, control, and paranoia. When the Persian king Xerxes lost soldiers to a storm, he was so enraged at the sea itself that he ordered the water whipped and branded, punishing the ocean for daring to defy him. That is entitlement. The universe owes me, and it will pay. Closer to our own time, the man who created the Beanie Baby craze once boasted that he could stamp his brand on a pile of dirt and people would still line up to buy it. That is ego drunk on its own success, certain the magic is you and not the moment, not the team, not the luck. Down that road waits the leader who trusts no one, controls everything, and slowly poisons the very thing they built. The higher you climb, the more the world tells you you're special. Believe it completely, and you become the tyrant of a smaller and smaller kingdom. Here is the paradox of reaching the top. Now the whole thing depends on you managing yourself. Dwight Eisenhower ran the largest war coalition in history, and he had a rule: never bring me a sealed envelope. Don't hand me a problem you haven't wrestled with first. That's what a team is for. Contrast John DeLorean, a gifted car maker whose ego made him micromanage, feud, and grandstand until his company burned through hundreds of millions and collapsed. The coach Pat Riley named the thing that destroys winning teams the disease of me. The moment the stars start caring more about their own credit than the shared win. And the cure? George Marshall gave away the one job he had trained his entire life for, command of the D-Day invasion, telling the president that his own wishes had nothing to do with the matter. He handed it to Eisenhower. That is not weakness. That is a man who had truly beaten his ego. There is an antidote to all of this, and it is older than any strategy. In 1879, the naturalist John Muir stood in the ice fields of Alaska and felt himself dissolve into something vast, what he called a connectedness with the whole living cosmos. The Stoics had a word for it too, sympathia, the sense that you are one small, joined part of a single enormous whole. Try it. It takes a chain of only 6 handshakes to connect a president today back to George Washington. The light from some of those stars overhead left them before you were born. Hold the sheer immensity of it, and your own importance shrinks to its true size, which is small, and that is a relief. Ego wants you to be the center of the universe. Awe reminds you that you are a guest in it, and guests, unlike kings, get to be amazed. The most powerful woman in the world spent years being underestimated, and she used it like a weapon. Angela Merkel was dismissed as gray, plain, boring. She didn't mind. When a hostile foreign leader, knowing she feared dogs, let a large one loose in their meeting, she sat perfectly still and afterward simply shrugged. Fear is a bad advisor. She stayed sober while others got drunk on power, modest, patient, unimpressed by her own reflection. Marcus Aurelius, who actually ran an empire once, wrote himself a note about the danger of being corrupted by the purple robe. Fight, he said, to be the person that philosophy tried to make you. That is the discipline of success. Staying clear-eyed while everyone around you swears you're a genius, because staying at the top is even harder than getting there. And for everything that comes next, when it all falls apart, ego is the enemy one final time. Remember the widow handed a newspaper? In 1963, Katharine Graham's husband, who ran the Washington Post, took his own life. Overnight, a woman with almost no business experience, who had been taught her entire life to stay quietly in the background, was handed control of a major newspaper. Ego, in that moment, would have been the easiest thing in the world. To bluster, to pretend, to overcompensate. She did the exact opposite. She admitted what she didn't know. She learned. She listened. And when the moment came, the Pentagon Papers, then Watergate, she risked the entire company to publish the truth, with a furious government threatening to crush her. A powerful man warned her she would regret it. She published anyway. The frightened widow became one of the most respected figures in America. Failure had handed her the paper. Humility taught her how to hold it. When life knocks you flat, you are handed a stretch of enforced stillness, a job you hate, an injury, a prison cell. Robert Greene calls it a choice between 2 kinds of time. Dead time, where you are passive and bitter, just waiting for it to be over, or a lifetime where you use it. Malcolm X entered prison barely able to write a clear sentence, so he got hold of a dictionary and he copied it out by hand. Every word, page after page after page, teaching himself to read, think, and argue. He walked in a small-time criminal and walked out one of the most formidable minds of his century. He later said that, in a way, prison had been his university. Same cell, same years. The whole difference was inside him. Ego says this is beneath me. I'll just wait it out. The person who rises asks a better question. What can I build right here in the ruins? History is full of people who did everything right and were still betrayed, and how they took it tells you who they truly were. The General Belisarius saved his empire not once but several times, and his jealous emperor repaid him with suspicion, humiliation, and disgrace. By legend, he ended his days blind and begging in the street, and never once complained that he'd been robbed of the credit he had earned. He had done the work. He knew he had done the work. And he decided that this had to be enough. The coach John Wooden redefined winning this way. Success is the peace of mind that comes from knowing you did your best, whatever the scoreboard finally says. Ego needs the reward, the trophy, the applause, the recognition, where the effort feels wasted. But the reward is not yours to control. The effort is. Pour everything into the work and then let go of what comes of it. Doing the work is enough. How do you keep going when the world's verdict is unfair? You keep your own scorecard. Warren Buffett asks a simple question. Would you rather be the greatest lover in the world and have everyone believe you're the worst, or the worst and have everyone believe you're the best? Your honest answer reveals whether you live by an inner scorecard or an outer one. In the year 2000, a skinny quarterback was picked 199th in the draft, an afterthought, barely won it. His name was Tom Brady. But here's the twist Holiday loves. The team that drafted him didn't congratulate themselves for the steal. They were ashamed they had almost missed him and kept a reminder of that failure on the wall. Both men were measuring against themselves, not the crowd. The outer scorecard is a mob. Loud, fickle, always changing. The inner one is quiet, and it is the only judge that will ever keep you honest. Sometimes the bravest thing ego will never let you do is stop. In 1985, Steve Jobs was fired from Apple, the company he founded, and it was, by his own later admission, entirely his own fault. Ego had made him reckless. The failure humbled him, and the humbler man who eventually returned built something far greater. But not everyone draws the line. Ryan Holiday watched it happen up close. The founder he had once idolized, running the company Holiday himself had helped build, could not stop fighting, could not admit an error, could not walk away, and rode it all the way into ruin, taking hundreds of millions of dollars and thousands of jobs down with him. Alexander Hamilton once gave 3 plain words of advice. Have the courage to make a full stop. When it's over, let it be over. Ego treats surrender as death, but knowing when to stop is not losing. Sometimes it is the only way to survive yourself. Remember Dave Mustaine, the guitarist thrown out of that band? He went on to form Megadeth and sell millions of records. By any normal measure, an enormous success. And yet, decades later, he sat in front of a camera and wept, still consumed by being the one who got kicked out. His rage carried a life sentence, and he was the one serving it. Now the other way. When a powerful newspaper baron tried to destroy Orson Welles' masterpiece Citizen Kane, Welles didn't burn with hatred. He actually invited the man to the premiere. Martin Luther King Jr. knew the reason. Hate, he said, is too great a burden to bear. Frederick Douglass, born into slavery, put it as pure defiance. They cannot degrade Frederick Douglass. The soul within me, no man can touch. This is the final stand against ego. When you have been wronged, ego demands that you feed the grudge forever. Freedom is choosing, instead, to set it down. So what does a life without the enemy actually look like? Not a trophy, not a throne, something much smaller. There is an old story Holiday loves about a warrior who asks a Zen master how to find enlightenment. The master answers, "Sweep the floor." That's it? Yes, sweep the floor, every minute of every day. And then sweep it again. When Holiday finishes a piece of writing he is proud of, he takes the rejected pages out to his garden and feeds them to the worms, watching his best work turn back into dirt on purpose to remember exactly what it's worth. Aspire, succeed, fail. And at every stage, the same quiet enemy waits inside you, wearing your face, whispering that you're special, that you've arrived, that it's someone else's fault. The work of a lifetime is to keep answering, not today. Ego is the enemy, and the floor, my friend, is never finished. So, pick up the broom.